What's the best joke, you know? Story 1. This reminds me of the man who was driving down the road, and his car broke down near a monastery. He goes to the monastery, knocks on the door, and says, "My car broke down. Do you think I could stay the night?" The monks graciously accept him, feed him dinner, and even fix his car. As the man tries to fall asleep, he hears a strange sound, one unlike anything he's ever heard before. The sirens that nearly led Odysseus to crash his ship come to his mind. He doesn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, trying to figure out what could possibly be making such a mesmerizing sound. The next morning, he asks the monks about it, but they say, "We can't tell you. You're not a monk." Distraught, the man leaves. Years later, still haunted by that sound, he returns to the monastery and pleads for the answer once more. The monks reply, "We can't tell you. You're not a monk." The man declares, "If the only way to find out what makes that beautiful sound is to become a monk, then please make me a monk." The monks respond, "You must travel the earth and tell us how many blades of grass there are and the exact number of grains of sand. When you find these answers, you will have become a monk." The man sets out on his quest. After years of searching, he returns as a gray-haired old man and knocks on the monastery door. A monk answers, and he is taken before a gathering of all the monks. "In my quest to discover that beautiful sound, I traveled the earth and found what you asked for. By design, the world is in a state of perpetual change. Only a higher power knows what you ask. All a man can truly know is himself, and only then if he is honest, reflective, and willing to confront self-deception." The monks reply, "Congratulations. You have become a monk. We shall now show you the way to the mystery of the sacred sound." The monks lead the man to a wooden door, where the head monk says, "The sound is beyond that door." They give him the key, and he opens the door. Behind it is another door made of stone. He is given the key to the stone door and opens it, finding a door made of ruby. This pattern continues with doors of emerald, pearl, and diamond. Finally, they arrive at a door made of solid gold. The sound is now clear and distinct. The monks say, "This is the final key to the last door." Nervously, he unlocks the door, turns the knob, and slowly pushes it open. Falling to his knees, he is utterly amazed to discover the source of that haunting, captivating sound. But of course, I can't tell you what it is, because you're not a monk. Story 2. Two men are drinking at a bar at the top of the Empire State Building when the first man turns to the other and says, "You know, last week I found out that if you jump from the top of this building, the winds around it are so intense that by the time you fall to the 10th floor, they carry you around the building and back into a window." The bartender just shakes his head in disapproval while wiping the bar. The second guy responds, "Are you serious? There's no way that could happen." The first man insists, "No, it's true. Let me prove it to you." He gets up from the bar, jumps over the balcony, and plummets toward the street below. As he nears the 10th floor, the high winds whip him around the building and back into a window. He takes the elevator back up to the bar. The second man, astonished, says, "I saw that with my own eyes, but that must have been a one-time fluke." "No, I'll prove it again," says the first man as he jumps once more. Just as before, the 10th floor wind gently carries him around the building and into the window. Once upstairs, he encourages his fellow drinker to try it. "Well, why not?" the second guy says, convinced. He jumps over the balcony, plummets downward, passes the 11th, 10th, 9th, and 8th floors, and hits the sidewalk with a thud. Back upstairs, the bartender turns to the first man and says, "You know, Superman, you're a real jerk when you're drunk." Story 3. A grandpa takes his grandson out fishing. The grandpa pulls out a cigarette and lights it. The kid asks, "Hey, Grandpa, can I have one?" The grandpa replies, "Does your nose touch your chin?" The kid says, "Well, no." The grandpa responds, "Then you're too young." Later, the grandpa pulls out some whiskey and takes a few sips. The kid asks, "Hey, can I have a drink of that, Grandpa?" The grandpa responds, "Does your nose touch your chin?" The kid replies, "No, it doesn't." The grandpa says, "Well, there's your answer." So the kid pulls out some cookies and starts snacking. The grandpa says, "Those cookies look pretty good. Could I have one?" The kid responds, "Does your nose touch your chin?" The grandpa proudly replies, "Why, yes, it does." The kid says, "Good. You can go ahead and make your own then." Story 4. Four old college buddies meet for dinner after 20 years. One man gets up to use the restroom. One of the men boasts, "My son's so successful, He started at the bottom valeting cars, worked his way up, and now he owns his second dealership. For his friend's birthday, he bought him a Maserati. Another man shares, "My son started as a junior aircraft technician, put himself through engineering school, and now owns a private jet company. For a friend's birthday, he gifted a twin-engine turboprop." The third man adds, "My son started mowing lawns and now runs a company building subdivisions. He gave his friend a new house for his birthday." When the fourth man returns and hears about their sons, he chuckles and says, "My son's a dancer. Last month, 3 of his clients gifted him a car, a plane, and a house for his birthday." Story 5. A man sat down at a bar and told the bartender, "I bet you $300 that I can pee into the cup all the way over there on the other side of the bar without missing a single drop." The bartender, confident it was impossible, replied, "There's no way you can do that." "Sure, I'll bet you $300. The man then starts to undo his pants and attempts to pee into the cup. He ends up spraying everywhere, on the bar, on the bottles, even on the bartender, without a single drop landing in the cup. The bartender, now grinning and laughing, says, "That's it, you owe me $300. The man then walks over to the pool table, where he starts laughing and shaking hands with the guys standing there. He returns to the bar, still chuckling, and hands the bartender the money. The bartender, puzzled, asks, "Why are you laughing? You just lost the bet." The man replies, "I'm laughing because I bet those guys over there $1,000 that I could pee all over you and your bar, and you'd still be laughing when I was done." Story 6. One day, 3 people were stranded on an island with a group of cannibals. The cannibals said, "If you do what we say, we won't harm you." Desperate to survive, the 3 people agreed to follow the cannibals' instructions. The cannibals said, "Go into the forest and pick 10 of the first fruit you find." The first person returned from the forest carrying 10 apples. The cannibals then instructed, "Put the apples up your backside without making any facial expressions." The person managed the first apple but grimaced on the second, so the cannibals killed him. The second person came back with 10 cherries. The cannibals gave the same instruction. The person made it to the 10th cherry but suddenly burst out laughing, so they killed him too. In heaven, the first person asked the second, "Why did you start laughing on the last cherry?" The second person replied, "I couldn't help it. I saw the third person coming out of the forest with pineapples." Story 7. A pair of hunters from Illinois are out in the woods. While descending a hill, one of them suddenly cries out in pain and tumbles to the bottom, clutching his chest as he hits the ground. The other hunter rushes to his side, noticing that his friend has stopped breathing. Quickly, he pulls out his phone and dials 911. After a few rings, the dispatcher picks up. "911, what is your emergency?" asks the dispatcher. The hunter replies, "I'm out near Route 51. I think my friend had a heart attack. He's not moving. What do I do?" The dispatcher responds, "It's okay, sir. Please calm down and make sure that he is really not responsive." The hunter says, "Okay." The dispatcher hears some rustling over the phone, followed by the loud boom of a 12-gauge shotgun. The hunter then comes back on the line and asks, "All right, now what?" Story 8. My grandpa used to tell this joke called the Yangtze River story. Whenever he started, relatives would tell me to get comfortable. He finally took the time to tell it to me at my cousin's wedding. There once was a family that lived on the Yangtze River. They had an outhouse right by the river, but one day it got pushed off the bank and floated downstream. The father of the family lined up his 3 sons, one young, one a teenager, and one almost an adult. He lined them up where the outhouse used to be and asked each one, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" The youngest boy looked off to the left, his eyes settling on the big red house they all painted last summer. The father then asked the next boy, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" This son looked straight up, swallowing hard enough that his throat made an audible sound. Finally, the father asked his eldest, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" The boy locked eyes with his father and firmly said, "No, I did not." The father pulled out a pastry from the nearby village and said, "I'm going to tell you a story. By the end, you'll tell me who pushed the outhouse into the river." The boys, a bit nervous, listened as the father began. One day, a little boy chopped down his father's cherry tree. Instead of lying, he told the truth, and his father rewarded him, gave him candy, and that boy grew up to be George Washington, the President of the United States. Slowly, the youngest boy stepped forward. "It was me, father. I pushed the outhouse into the river." In a flash, the father had the youngest bent over his knee, belt in hand, delivering a hard lashing. The boy cried out, "You said! You said!" The father replied, "George Washington's father wasn't sitting in the cherry tree." Story 9. Three football fans, a Bengals fan, a Browns fan, and a Steelers fan are walking down the street heading to a bar. As they approach the entrance, they notice something in the bushes. It's a woman. Unfortunately, she's deceased, lying face up, and completely nude. Out of respect, they call the police and are instructed to wait there. While waiting, the Browns fan takes off his hat and covers her right breast to preserve her dignity. Not wanting to be outdone, the Bengals fan follows suit, covering her left breast with his hat. Feeling the pressure, the Steelers fan reluctantly takes off his hat and covers the woman's crotch. When the police arrive, they question the men and begin examining the scene. An officer lifts the Browns hat, takes some notes, and places it back. He does the same with the Bengals hat. When he reaches the Steelers hat, he lifts it, looks perplexed, takes some notes, and then lifts it again. He repeats this process several times, each time appearing more confused. Finally, the Steelers fan, feeling uneasy, asks, "Hey, why do you keep looking under my hat?" The officer replies, "It's just strange. I've only ever found jerks under a Steelers hat." Story 10. A man gets a tapeworm from a meal one day. He visits doctor after doctor, trying to get rid of it, but no one can help him. Every doctor just dismisses him, unable to remove the worm. Eventually, he gets a recommendation. Go see the old doctor up the road. His methods are unusual, but he always gets the job done. Desperate and out of options, the man goes to see the old doctor. He explains his problem, and the old doctor tells him to come back the next day, bringing an apple and a cookie. The man returns the following day with the items, and the doctor instructs him to lean against the table. To the man's shock, the doctor shoves the apple up his backside, followed by the cookie. Stunned, the man asks why the doctor would do that. The doctor just tells him to repeat the process the next day. Having exhausted all other options, the man complies. The next day, the same thing happens. Apple first, then the cookie. The doctor then instructs the man to bring both foods again, plus a hammer. Feeling uneasy but resigned, the man agrees. On the third day, the doctor once again pushes the apple up the man's backside and then picks up the hammer. But instead of doing anything right away, the doctor waits. The man, tense and confused, stays still. Suddenly, the tapeworm sticks its head out and yells, "Where the heck is my cookie?" Story 11. A man is sitting at his favorite pub, as he has countless times before, ordering beer after beer and chatting with the bartender. Eventually, he drinks so much that he ends up throwing up on himself. Panicked, he mutters, "Oh no, my wife is going to kill me. She's already mad about how much I drink, and now I've thrown up on myself again." The bartender, seeing his distress, comes up with an idea. "Listen, take a $20 bill from your wallet and put it in your shirt pocket. Tell your wife that some other drunk guy at the bar threw up on you and gave you the money to get your shirt cleaned." Relieved, the man follows the bartender's advice, thinking the plan is so brilliant that he can afford to stay and have a few more beers. He eventually stumbles home, where his wife is waiting for him at the door. "Where have you been? You've been drinking again, and you threw up on yourself." No, honey," he slurs. "Some other guy at the bar got so drunk he puked on me. But look, he gave me $20 to get my shirt cleaned." He hands her the money from his pocket. She looks at it and says, "Then why is there $40 here, you idiot?" He pauses and replies, "Oh, yeah, he also pooped in my pants." Story 12. A moth walks into a podiatrist's office, and the podiatrist asks, "What seems to be the problem, moth?" The moth sighs and replies, "Where do I start? I go to work every day for Gregory Alinovich. I work and work, but honestly, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I don't think Gregory Alinovich knows either. He just knows he has power over me, and that seems to make him happy. But me? I wake up in a malaise, drag myself through the day. At night, I sometimes wake up and look over at the old lady sleeping beside me, the one I once loved. I don't know where to turn. My youngest, Alexandria, she didn't make it through the cold last year. It took her, just like it did so many others. And my other boy, Grigaro Ivanalatitovich, this one hurts the most, Doc. I look at him, and I can't feel love anymore. All I see is the same cowardice that stares back at me when I look in the mirror. If only I weren't so afraid. Maybe I'd reach for that loaded gun by my bedside and end this miserable existence. Sometimes I feel like a spider, even though I'm a moth, just barely hanging on to a fragile web with an unending fire beneath me. I'm not doing well, Doc. The podiatrist, taken aback, says, Moth, you've got a lot going on. You really should be seeing a psychiatrist. Why did you come here? The moth looks up and says, because the light was on. Story 13. There was once a man in Bulgaria who drove trains for a living. He absolutely loved his job. Driving trains had been his dream since he was a child. He especially enjoyed making the train go as fast as possible. Unfortunately, one day he got a bit too reckless and caused a crash. Although he survived, one person died in the accident. Naturally, he was taken to court and found guilty, resulting in a death sentence by electrocution. On the day of his execution, he requested a single banana as his last meal. After eating it, he was strapped into the electric chair. The switch was flipped, sparks flew, and smoke filled the air. But nothing happened. The man remained completely unharmed. At the time, an old Bulgarian law stated that a failed execution was a sign of divine intervention, so he was set free. Miraculously, he even got his old job back. However, he hadn't learned his lesson and continued driving recklessly. This time he caused another crash, killing 2 people. The trial proceeded as before, and once again he was sentenced to death. For his final meal, he requested 2 bananas. After eating them, he was strapped into the chair. The switch was flipped, sparks flew, smoke filled the room, and once again nothing happened. The man was released and somehow got his job back yet again. As if no one had seen it coming, he crashed another train, killing 3 people. Sentenced to death for the 3rd time, he requested 3 bananas for his final meal. The executioner, clearly fed up, snapped, "No! I'm tired of you eating bananas and walking out alive. No bananas this time. We're just doing it now." Though it was against protocol, they strapped him in without giving him his final meal. The switch was flipped, sparks flew, smoke filled the room, and the man remained completely unharmed. The executioner, completely baffled, asked, "How is this possible?" The man looked at him calmly and said, "Oh, the bananas had nothing to do with it. I'm just a bad conductor." Story 14. Recruiting for the U.S. Armed Services was declining. They had advertised, offered college money, and granted large bonuses to new recruits, but nothing worked. One day, the Joint Chiefs of Staff gathered at a tavern in Washington, D.C. to brainstorm a solution. After hours of discussion, they came up with an idea. The Department of Defense would finance a Netflix special where the most decorated member of each branch would compete. The catch? Each contestant could pick 2 body parts, and they would receive $1,000 for every centimeter between them. On the day of filming, the most decorated Air Force member, a captain, steps up first. He stretches his arms out to his sides, palms down. The measuring tape private first class records the distance from fingertip to fingertip, 154 centimeters. The captain receives a check for $154,000, along with a few appreciative handshakes. Next up is the Navy's Rear Admiral. He chooses to measure from his toe to his raised hand. The measurement comes out to 182 centimeters, and he walks away with $182,000. Then it's the Army's turn. Their top soldier, a sergeant major, strikes a pose similar to John Travolta's signature move in Saturday Night Fever, adding a bit more length and receiving $195,000. Finally, it's the Marine Corps' turn. The most decorated Marine is a grizzled gunnery sergeant, rugged, tall, and rough around the edges. He confidently declares, "From the tip of my banana to my balls." Everyone bursts into laughter. The Joint Chiefs joke that even if he's well endowed, it won't amount to much. The host tries to convince the Marine to change his mind, but the gunny remains firm. The Marine drops his trousers, and the measuring tape private first class kneels down to measure, but then just freezes, staring in confusion. The Marine, slightly annoyed, asks, "What's wrong, Private? Did you forget how to read a tape measure?" The private stammers, "No, gunny, but where are your balls?" Without missing a beat, the Marine replies, "Oh, about 20 miles south of Baghdad, give or take." Story 15. A man went on vacation to Spain. One day, while in his hotel room, he suddenly began to feel extremely ill. It was so severe that he thought it best to see a doctor. Not knowing where the nearest hospital was, he picked up the phone in his room and called the concierge. When the call was answered, he asked, "Where is the nearest hospital? I feel really sick and need to see a doctor." The concierge replied, No need to worry about going to the hospital, sir. The hotel has its own doctor. I'll send him up to your room right away. Surprised by this, the man waited, and sure enough, a few minutes later, there was a knock at his door. The man opened it to find the doctor standing there. As the doctor began examining him, the man said, "I didn't think a hotel would have an in-house doctor like this." The doctor smiled and replied, "You wouldn't be the first to think that. No one expects the Spanish in-physician." Story 16. This joke works best when you're with a group of friends and you pick out one who can take a joke. Three friends were sitting around reading the new Guinness Book of World Records. Inspired, they decided to see if they could become record holders too. The first guy said, "I bet I can clap my hands faster than anyone in the world." He recorded a video of himself clapping at an incredible speed and sent it off as proof. The second guy said, "I'm double jointed. I can get into the most flexible positions ever." He filmed himself twisting into impossible shapes and sent that in as well. The third guy, a bit more sheepishly, said, "Well, I'm pretty sure I have the smallest banana in the world. At least I can hold a record." He took a photo and sent it off. A few weeks later, the new edition of the Guinness Book of World Records came out, and they all gathered to see if they made it. The first guy flipped through the pages and shouted, "Woohoo! I made it, fastest clapper in the world." The second guy took the book, flipped some more pages, and exclaimed, "Holy crap, I'm officially the most flexible person alive." The third guy grabbed the book, eagerly searching for his claim. Suddenly his face turned red, and he shouted in disbelief, "What the heck? Who the hell is insert your friend's name?" Story 17. My grandmother used to tell this one all the time. A man goes on a trip to Israel with his wife and mother-in-law. During the trip, the mother-in-law unexpectedly passes away. With his wife grieving at the hotel, the man goes to the U.S. Embassy to figure out what to do. He explains the situation to the embassy worker, who says, "If you choose to bury her here, it's free of charge and covered by the Israeli government. However, if you want her body sent back to the U.S. for burial, it will cost $3,000. The man replies, "Wow, that's way beyond what we can afford. Let me go back to the hotel and break the news to my wife. I'll be back later to confirm." Not even 20 minutes later, the man comes running back to the embassy, breathless, and slams $3,000 in cash on the desk. "If it costs more, just let me know. Just make sure to send her back to the U.S. The embassy worker, taken aback, says, "Sir, you must truly love your mother-in-law to pay so much to have her brought back home." The man shakes his head and says, "It's not that. On my way back, I overheard some people talking about a Jewish man who was buried here over 2,000 years ago and came back to life. I can't take that risk with her." Story 18. Three guys are walking down the street when they find a lamp. They rub it, and sure enough, a genie pops out, granting them 3 wishes each. The first guy wishes for a beautiful wife, and poof, a gorgeous woman appears beside him. The second guy wishes to be irresistible to every woman, and immediately the first guy's wife starts walking toward him. The third guy, in a rather odd choice, wishes for one of his arms to rotate clockwise forever. Instantly, his arm starts spinning. During the second round of wishes, the first guy asks for $1,000,000, and suddenly he's surrounded by 1,000,000 deer. The second guy wishes for infinite money, and his bank account becomes limitless. The third guy, still sticking to his strange ideas, wishes for his other arm to rotate counterclockwise forever. On the last round, the first guy wishes to be younger, the second guy wishes for eternal youth, and the third guy wishes to be able to dance nonstop. 10 years go by, and they meet up at a mutual friend's party. The first guy proudly shares how he's happy, successful, and still married to his beautiful wife. The second guy talks about his luxurious life, constantly traveling and being surrounded by women. The third guy, meanwhile, is still dancing nonstop with his arms swinging in opposite directions and just says, "Guys, I think I messed up." Story 19. One of my favorites. An American, an Indian, and a Russian pass away and find themselves at the gates of heaven, greeted by St. Peter. "Purgatory is full right now, so we'll put you through a little test to see if you can enter heaven straight away or be cast into hell. This is the Archangel Gabriel. He will strike you 3 times with his whip. You must not make the slightest sound no matter how painful it is. You may choose how you want to protect yourself," says St. Peter. The American steps forward and says, "I want a bulletproof vest, inside a battle tank, inside a bunker built to withstand a nuclear bomb." St. Peter waves his hand, and it's done. Gabriel cracks his whip. The bunker splits open like a coconut. The second crack shreds the tank like wet cardboard. The third crack rips the vest in the American apart, and he screams horribly before being sent to hell. Next, the Indian steps forward. He simply asks for a few minutes to meditate and prepare. Gabriel strikes 3 times, and the Indian takes all 3 hits with perfect calm, not making a single sound. Both St. Peter and Gabriel are impressed and welcome him to heaven. The Indian, curious, asks for a few minutes to watch his friend. Finally, it's the Russian's turn. St. Peter asks how he wants to protect himself. The Russian thinks for a moment and replies, "Behind the Indian." Story 20. A cowboy decided to hire an Indian to help him find fortune and travel across the land. On the first day, the Indian suddenly says, "Stop." He gets down on the ground, picks up some dirt, and presses his face against the earth. "Wagon train, 2 miles that way," he says. Amazed, the cowboy asks, "How do you know?" The Indian replies, "I hear it in the ground." They move forward, and sure enough, they find a wagon train just as predicted. A couple of days later, the Indian says, "Stop." Again, he gets down, picks up the dirt, and puts his face to the ground. "Train, 5 miles that way." They move forward, and once again, the Indian is right. There's a train. A few days go by, and the Indian suddenly says, "Stop." He repeats his ritual, gets down, picks up the dirt, and puts his face to the ground. "Buffalo coming," he announces. Curious, the cowboy asks, "Really? How do you know that?" The Indian replies, "Face sticky." Story 21. 3 guys are walking through the woods when they come across a lamp. One of them picks it up, gives it a rub, and out pops a genie. The genie booms. "You have finally freed me after all these years, so I'll grant each of you 3 wishes." The first guy immediately blurts out, "I want $1 billion." Poof! He's holding a printout showing his account balance is now $1,003.50. The second man thinks for a moment and says, "I want to be the richest man alive." Poof! He's holding papers showing his net worth now exceeds $100 billion. The third guy takes a while to think and finally says, "I want my left arm to rotate clockwise for the rest of my life." Poof! His left arm starts rotating in a circle. The genie tells them it's time for their second wish. The first guy says, "I want to be married to the most beautiful woman on earth." Poof! A stunning beauty wraps herself around his arm. The second guy says, "I want to be good-looking and charismatic so I can have any woman I want." Poof! His looks change dramatically, and immediately the first guy's wife starts flirting with him. The third guy says, "I want my right arm to rotate counterclockwise until I die." Poof! Now both his arms are rotating in opposite directions. The genie advises them to think carefully about their final wish. After some thought, the first guy says, "I never want to become sick or injured. I want to stay healthy until I die." Poof! His complexion clears up, his aches vanish, and he feels fantastic. The second guy says, "I never want to grow old. I want to stay 29 forever." Poof! He already looks more youthful. The third guy, with a triumphant smile, says, "My last wish is for my head to nod back and forth forever." Poof! He's now nodding his head while his arms continue to rotate in opposite directions. The genie wishes them good luck and disappears. The men go their separate ways. Years later, they meet at a party and discuss their lives since the wishes. The first guy is ecstatic. "I've invested wisely, made even more money, and my wife is amazing. I've never been sick or injured all these years." The second guy grins and says, "I've used my wealth to build charities. I'm still the richest man alive, and I haven't aged a day. Also, your wife is pretty wild." The third guy walks in, arms flailing in opposite directions and head bobbing up and down, and says, "Guys, I think I messed up." Story 22. A guy is planning to cross the desert. He packs plenty of food, lots of water, takes his gun, hops on his camel, and begins his journey. After a few days, he starts to feel really lonely and, well, a bit desperate. One evening, as he's setting up camp, he eyes the camel. No one is around, so he thinks, why not? He approaches from behind, but just as he's about to do the deed, the camel turns its head and almost bites him. Frustrated, he backs off and goes to sleep. The next night, feeling just as desperate, he tries again. But once more, the camel turns around and snaps at him. This happens the following night as well, and again the night after that. Then one night, as he's just about to sneak up behind the camel again, He hears a woman screaming and men shouting from the other side of a sand dune. Grabbing his gun, he rushes to the top of the dune and sees a beautiful, scantily clad woman being chased by two men. He shoots both men to save her. The woman runs to him, grateful and breathless. "Oh, thank you. You've saved my life. I'm a concubine of the Sultan, and I just escaped from his harem. I'll do anything to repay you. Just name it." The man looks her up and down with a glint in his eye and says, "Actually, there is one thing you can do for me." "What is it?" the woman asks eagerly. The man replies, "Can you hold this camel's head for me?" Story 23. There's this TV program focused on ancient cultures, and they decide to make a special episode about Sardinian culture. The crew goes to a small village and starts asking around until the locals suggest they find the old shepherd who lives outside of town. When they finally find him, he reluctantly agrees to do an interview. After a few questions, the interviewer asks, "What was the best day of your life?" The old man replies, "When I lost my sheep." The interviewer, a bit confused, asks, "Oh, and can you tell us why?" "We had been searching for her for a long time, near the sea and up to the mountains. When we finally found her, we had a huge party," the old man says with a nostalgic smile. The interviewer, sensing something uncomfortable, quickly changes the subject. "Well, what was your second best day?" The old man thinks for a moment and says, "When I lost my dog." The interviewer, bracing himself, cautiously asks, "And why was that?" The shepherd replies, "We had been looking for my beloved dog for months, near the sea and up to the mountains. When we finally found him, we celebrated with another big party in the village." Trying to steer the conversation away from any more awkward answers, the interviewer asks, "All right, what was the worst day of your life?" The old man looks down and murmurs, "When I got lost." Story 24. One day a man offers to take his son to the circus, which is coming to town in a few weeks. The boy is thrilled and can hardly wait for the big day. Finally, it's time to go. They arrive early, get front row seats, and enjoy sodas and peanuts. The show starts with jugglers, followed by lion tamers, elephants, and motorcycle stunt riders. Eventually, a tiny car rolls out, and one clown after another climbs out until 10 clowns are in the arena. They start performing tricks, making the crowd laugh. The lead clown then steps forward, telling jokes and interacting with the audience. At one point, the clown asks who is sitting in seat number 13. The boy realizes it's his seat, so he stands up and waves. The clown points at him and shouts, "You're a horse's ass!" The whole crowd erupts in laughter, leaving the boy humiliated. He runs out of the arena, devastated. For days, the boy is inconsolable. His parents, worried about his state of mind, take him to a therapist. After a session, the therapist tells the father that the boy is heartbroken because he didn't know how to respond to the insult. The therapist suggests enrolling him in a school specializing in comebacks to help rebuild his confidence. The father agrees. The boy attends the comeback school and quickly excels. His natural talent makes him the top of his class, leading to advanced training. He eventually earns a PhD in comebacks, becoming an expert in witty responses. Years later, he hears the circus is coming to town again. Determined to face his past, he buys a front row ticket, seat number 13, just like before. The show is almost identical: jugglers, lion tamers, elephants, and the iconic clown car. When the lead clown finally asks who's in seat number 13, the man confidently stands up. The clown points at him again and yells, "You're a horse's ass!" Without missing a beat, the man points back and shouts, "Right back at you, clown!" The crowd bursts into applause, and the man finally feels a sense of redemption. Story 25. A local farmer had about 20 hens, and his rooster had just died. He needed a new one, so he went to the local farmer's fair and approached the rooster dealer. "Hey, I need a strong rooster that can breed with my hens," the farmer said. The salesman presented 3 roosters at different price points. "This one is pretty cheap, a bit skinny, but he'll get the job done. $10. This one on the left is a bit fuller and will definitely give you better chicks in the future. $20. The second rooster was quite beautiful, with nice feathers and a full chest. "However," the salesman continued, "I have this third rooster. This guy will mate with anything you put in front of him. He's strong, vigorous, never gets sick, and in 3 days, all your hens will be laying eggs with fantastic prize-winning chicks. $35. The farmer was impressed with the last rooster. His shiny black feathers and loud crowing were truly impressive. "I'll take the last one. I really need my hens to start laying soon." The farmer went home, thrilled with his new purchase. He took the rooster straight to the hen house, locked the gate securely to ensure his expensive investment wouldn't escape, and went about his day. The next morning, the farmer was surprised not to hear the rooster's loud crowing. Concerned, he rushed to the hen house, only to find the gate's lock completely destroyed. Looking around, he saw his hens lying on their backs, legs up in the air. God damn it! That monster mated with all my hens and ran off. The farmer hurried to his neighbor's house to ask if he'd seen the rooster. Oh, Lord, the neighbor said. I don't know what happened, but when I went to check on my sheep this morning, they were all lying on their backs too, but no sign of your rooster. Stunned, the farmer continued his search. Another neighbor reported that his cows were also found lying on their backs. How is this possible? How could a rooster mate with cows? The farmer exclaimed. Following the trail of chaos, the farmer saw cows, horses, cats, dogs, and even one of his neighbor's wives lying on their backs. Nothing seemed to escape the rooster's relentless libido. Hours later, exhausted and ready to give up, the farmer spotted the rooster lying on top of a hill, surrounded by circling vultures. Triumphant, the farmer yelled, I found you, you crazy bird. No more of your antics. You're going to be chicken soup tomorrow. As he approached, he heard the rooster whisper softly, Shh, let them land. Story 26. It was a typical day for the bartender, who was cleaning his bar when an unusual customer walked in. The man wore an expensive suit, had a supermodel on each arm, and a limo parked outside. Yet despite his wealth and charm, he had a perfectly round, giant, yellow head. The customer sat down at the bar and ordered drinks for everyone, paying with a roll of $100 bills. He immediately attracted the attention of every woman in the bar, despite his bizarre appearance. Curiosity got the best of the bartender, and he finally asked, Excuse me, I can't help but notice that you're obviously wealthy and irresistible to women, but you have a perfectly round, giant, yellow head. How did that happen? The man sighed and began his story. A while back, when I was broke, I was walking along the beach and saw an old lamp half buried in the sand. I picked it up, gave it a clean, and poof, out popped a genie. The genie explained that he'd been trapped in that lamp for 200 years, and he was so grateful that he would grant me 3 wishes. For my first wish, I asked for unlimited wealth. The genie said, It is done. From that moment on, whenever I needed money, it was there. For my second wish, I asked to be irresistible to the most beautiful women in the world. The genie granted that too, and since then, I've had any woman I wanted. For my third wish, and this is where I messed up, I wished for a perfectly round, giant yellow head. Story 27. Trump dies and finds himself in hell, where he is greeted by Satan. Satan says, Look, things aren't so bad here. Give me a chance, and I bet I can find something that suits you. He continues, I've got 3 people here who weren't quite as bad as you. I'll let one of them go, but you have to take their place, and I'll even let you decide who leaves. Trump thinks that sounds reasonable and agrees. The devil opens the first room. Inside, Richard Nixon is diving repeatedly into a large pool of water, surfacing empty-handed each time. This endless cycle is his fate in hell. No, Trump says, I'm not a good swimmer, and I couldn't do that all day long. Satan says, no problem. Let me show you another room. In the second room, Tony Blair is wielding a sledgehammer, tirelessly breaking a huge stack of rocks. Trump shakes his head. No, I've got a problem with my shoulder. I'd be in constant pain if I had to break rocks all day. The devil opens the third door. Inside, Jeffrey Epstein is lying naked on the floor, while a beautiful 20-year-old woman is giving him a massage, moving up and down rhythmically. Trump stares in disbelief for a moment, then grins. Well, now this I think I can handle. The devil smirks and says, All right, Stacy, you're free to go. Story 28. Peter and Billy are 2 young missionaries spreading Christianity in a remote jungle. One day they are captured by a tribe and brought before a large gathering. The chief gives a passionate speech about how missionaries have been corrupting his people for years and declares that they must be punished. He then turns to the 2 men and says, In our tribe, we have 2 punishments, death or ruru. Which do you choose? Billy is too terrified to speak, but Peter, trying to be brave, says, Well, if that's the choice, I'll take ruru. The chief smiles. Ruru it is, he announces, and the crowd begins chanting, Roo, roo, roo. A low bench is brought out, and Peter is placed in a vulnerable position. Over the next few hours, every man in the tribe takes turns subjecting Peter to Ruru. Afterward, Billy and the broken Peter are taken to a guarded hut for the night. Throughout the night, Billy hears Peter moaning in pain, reliving the ordeal. The next morning, the guards come for Billy and bring him before the tribe. Yesterday, your companion received his punishment, the chief says. Today it is your turn. What shall it be, death or Ruru? Summoning all his courage, Billy shouts, I choose death. The chief nods. Very well. For your crimes against our people, you shall be put to death. He gestures to the guards, who bring axes and the same low bench from the previous night. But first, a little Ruru. Story 29. A priest, a carpenter, and a soldier are on a plane when the pilot suddenly announces, Everybody drop your heaviest things, we're going down. The priest drops a Bible, the carpenter drops a hammer, and the soldier drops a bomb. Fortunately, the plane lands safely. Afterward, they find 3 kids, 2 crying and 1 laughing. They approach the first crying kid and ask what happened. The kid says, I said a swear word, and a Bible fell from the sky and hit me in the head. They move on to the second crying kid and ask the same question. The kid says, I was putting nails between my toes and a hammer fell down and nailed them in. Finally, they reach the third kid, who is laughing hysterically. They ask him what happened. The kid says, Grandpa farted and the house blew up. Some jokes never lose their charm, even if they were funnier back in 3rd grade. Story 30. An old man is sitting on his porch when he sees little Johnny walking down the street with a wagon full of tape. Curious, he shouts out, Hey kid, where are you going with that duct tape? Johnny replies confidently, I'm going to go catch some ducks. The old man chuckles, shaking his head. You can't catch ducks with duct tape. Johnny just keeps walking without responding. About an hour later, the old man is astonished to see Johnny proudly marching back with his wagon full of ducks. The next day, the old man is on his porch again when he sees Johnny walking down the street with his piggy bank. Intrigued once more, he shouts, Hey kid, where are you going with that piggy bank? Johnny answers, I'm going to go catch some pigs. The old man scoffs, You can't catch pigs with a piggy bank. Again, Johnny walks off, and to the old man's surprise, an hour later, Johnny returns with his wagon full of pigs. The following day, the old man sees Johnny dragging a wagon full of pussy willows. He jumps up and yells, Hey kid, let me get my coat. Story 31. A fish is swimming down a stream and spots a fly hovering about 7 inches above the water. The fish thinks, if that fly drops 6 inches, I'm going to eat that fly, and I'll have a good dinner tonight. On the riverbank, a bear notices the fish eyeing the fly and thinks, if that fly drops 6 inches and that fish goes for the fly, I'll catch that fish and have a good dinner tonight. Just behind the bear, a hunter is aiming his rifle and thinks, if that fly drops 6 inches, the fish will go for the fly, the bear will go for the fish, and I'll shoot that bear. My family and I will have a good dinner tonight. Nearby, a mouse spots a cheese sandwich sticking out of the hunter's pocket. The mouse thinks, if that fly drops 6 inches, the fish will go for the fly, the bear will go for the fish, the hunter will shoot the bear, and he'll drop that cheese sandwich. I'll have a good dinner tonight. In a tree above the hunter, a cat sees the mouse and thinks, if that fly drops 6 inches, the fish will go for the fly, the bear will go for the fish, the hunter will shoot the bear, the mouse will go for the sandwich, and I'll catch that mouse. I'll have a good dinner tonight. Finally, the fly drops 6 inches. The fish leaps for the fly, the bear swipes at the fish, the hunter fires and drops his sandwich, the mouse rushes for the sandwich, and the cat jumps at the mouse but overshoots and lands in the stream. The moral of the story, if a fly drops 6 inches, a pussy's going to get wet. Story 32. A man with a pineapple for a head walks into a saloon. Naturally, everyone stares as he makes his way to the bar, but the women especially can't help but swoon, seemingly forgetting they're there with their significant others. The man, clearly wealthy, orders the most expensive whiskey, pulls out a wad of cash from his pocket, and leaves a generous tip. After a few drinks, the bartender can't contain his curiosity any longer. He asks, I'm sorry to be so direct, but you're clearly rich, charming, and quite the ladies' man, but you have a pineapple for a head. What's your story? The man sighs and begins to explain. A while back, I was walking along the beach when I stumbled upon an old lamp buried in the sand. Just for fun, I rubbed it, and wouldn't you know it? A genie appeared, offering me 3 wishes. Now, I've heard stories about wishes going wrong, so I thought long and hard. For my first wish, I wanted to be financially secure. I wished for a wad of cash to always be in my pocket, in the local currency, wherever I happened to be. It worked perfectly. For my second wish, I wanted to be irresistible to women, but not in a way that caused chaos. So I wished for every woman to find me physically attractive, but not to act violently or too forward. It worked like a charm. The bartender nods in admiration. That's smart thinking. But what about your head? The man shakes his pineapple head and says, well, that's where I messed up. I wished for my head to be a pineapple. Story 33. There was once a family with 3 sons and their divorced parents. It was their father's birthday, so the 3 brothers got together to discuss their gifts. The first son, John, had bought a golf kit since his father always enjoyed golfing. To his disappointment, the father responded, John, after a few years, I've come to realize that golf is a boring sport, and the people who play it are either hipsters or complete morons. Thanks for the thought, though. The second son, Brian, had bought a hunting rifle, the best the gun shop had to offer. He was dismayed when his father said, Brian, I've matured in my old age and come to understand what a cruel sport hunting is. I appreciate the thought, though. The third son, Tony, thought to himself, Dad hates reading, but he loves being read to. I'll get him a specially trained parrot to read the book for him. It's a really expensive gift, but he's worth it. Their father was delighted beyond words when he received the gift from his youngest. He said, Tony, you were always my favorite son, and I'm thinking of leaving the house to you when it's my time to go. That chicken was delicious. Story 34. 3 guys are hiking through the woods when they find a lamp. One of them picks it up, rubs it, and out pops a genie. The genie booms, You have finally freed me after all these years, so I'll grant each of you 3 wishes. The first guy immediately blurts out, I want $1 billion. Poof! He's holding a printout showing his account balance as $1,002.46. The second guy thinks for a moment, then says, I want to be the richest man alive. Poof! He's holding papers showing his net worth well over $100 billion. The third guy thinks even longer and finally says, I want my left arm to rotate clockwise for the rest of my life. Poof! His arm starts rotating. The genie tells them it's time for their second wish. The first guy says, I want to be married to the most beautiful woman on earth. Poof! A stunning beauty wraps herself around his arm. The second guy says, I want to be good-looking and charismatic so I can have every girl I want. Poof! His appearance changes, and the first guy's wife immediately starts flirting with him. The third guy says, I want my right arm to rotate counterclockwise until I die. Poof! Now both his arms are rotating in opposite directions. The genie tells them to think carefully about their third wish. After some thought, the first guy says, I never want to get sick or injured. I want to stay healthy until I die. Poof! His complexion clears up, and he feels great. The second guy says, I never want to grow old. I want to stay 29 forever. Poof! He looks even younger. The third guy grins triumphantly and says, My last wish is for my head to nod back and forth. Poof! Now he's nodding his head while still flailing his arms. The genie wishes them good luck, disappears, and the men go their separate ways. Years later, they meet again and chat about how things have been going. The first guy is ecstatic. I've invested the money and multiplied it many times over, so my family and I will be among the richest forever. My wife is amazing, and I haven't been sick once. The second guy smiles and says, I built charities worldwide with a fraction of my wealth. I'm still the richest guy alive, praised for my good deeds, and I haven't aged a day. Also, yeah, your wife is pretty wild in bed. The third guy walks in, still flailing his arms and nodding his head, and says, Guys, I think I messed up. Story 35. Researchers for the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority recently found over 200 dead crows near Greater Boston. Concerned that the birds might have died from avian flu, they called in a bird pathologist to examine the remains. After a thorough analysis, the pathologist confirmed that the crows did not die from avian flu. Instead, the cause of death was vehicular impacts. However, the investigation revealed an interesting detail. paint marks on the crow's beaks and claws. By analyzing the paint residues, it was determined that 98% of the crows were killed by trucks, while only 2% were killed by cars. Perplexed by this disparity, the MTA hired an ornithological behaviorist to figure out why so many more crows were hit by trucks than cars. The behaviorist quickly concluded that crows, when eating roadkill, always have a lookout stationed in a nearby tree to warn them of approaching danger. The scientific conclusion: while all the lookout crows could say caw, none could say truck. Story 36. A guy goes hunting in the woods and spots a massive bear about 100 yards away. He carefully pulls out his rifle, takes aim, steadies his breathing, and pulls the trigger. There's a loud bang, and as the smoke clears, the bear is nowhere to be seen. The hunter rushes to the spot, searching for any trace of the animal. Just as he begins to think he imagined the whole thing, he feels a heavy tap on his shoulder. Turning around slowly, he finds himself staring at the bear, now standing on its hind legs, towering over him. The bear calmly says, "Look, buddy, you tried to kill me, and I'm not just going to let that slide. But I'm not heartless, so I'll give you a choice. I can either shred you to pieces, or you can drop your pants, bend over, and I'll have my way with you." The hunter, terrified and knowing he has no chance of escape, gulps and decides to comply to survive. He drops his pants, bends over, and endures the humiliating ordeal. When the bear finishes, it simply says, "Have a good day," and walks off into the woods. Humiliated and enraged, the hunter returns to camp. Determined to get revenge, he grabs his biggest gun, a .50 sniper rifle, and heads back into the woods. He tracks down the bear, sneaks to within 50 yards, aims directly at the bear's heart, and pulls the trigger. The shot echoes through the forest, but when the smoke clears, the bear is gone. The hunter's heart sinks as he feels a familiar, heavy tap on his shoulder. Turning around, he once again finds the bear, now smiling. Without saying a word, the bear motions for the hunter to turn around. Realizing his situation, the hunter once again submits. But this time it's far worse and longer than before. Once it's over, the bear wanders off again. The hunter, now seething with rage, heads back to camp, determined to end this once and for all. He gathers every stick of dynamite he can find and sets a trap for the bear. Eventually, the bear returns, stepping right into the middle of the explosives. The hunter presses the detonator, and the explosion shakes the forest, sending dirt and debris flying everywhere. After the dust settles, the hunter cautiously approaches the massive crater. Suddenly, he feels that same heavy tap on his shoulder. He slowly turns to see the bear, arms crossed, wearing a smug smile. The bear looks him up and down and says, "Let's be honest, pal. You're not really in this for the hunting, are you?" Story 37. Joe was having a quiet drink at a high-end rooftop bar when a drunk guy stumbled out of the elevator and slurred to the bartender, "Give me 6 double shots of tequila, please." The bartender hesitated but eventually poured the tequila. The drunk guy slammed down all 6 doubles as fast as he could, then ran out to the balcony and jumped off. Joe was horrified and immediately rushed to the elevator to go down to the ground floor, expecting to find a gruesome scene. As the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, he was shocked to see the drunk guy standing there, slightly wobbly but completely unharmed. You going back up too?" The drunk guy slurred as Joe stood there speechless. As they rode the elevator back up, Joe stammered, "But I saw you fall off the balcony. How the hell did you survive a 20-story fall?" The drunk guy replied, "It's simple, really. You see, tequila has a lot of alcohol. If you drink enough of it in one go, your body tries to release it all at once, usually through a fart. When you're in free fall, your body releases so much gas that it's almost like a parachute. The farts slow you down enough that when you hit the ground, it's like floating." Joe couldn't believe it, but was intrigued enough to try it himself. Back at the bar, the drunk guy ordered 6 double shots of tequila for Joe. The bartender poured them out, and Joe downed them as fast as he could. Stumbling, he went to the balcony and jumped off. As he fell, he remembered the drunk guy's advice and tried to push out a fart. Splat! Joe hit the ground with such force that his body barely held together. Onlookers screamed at the horrific sight of Joe's lifeless body. Back at the bar, the drunk guy and the bartender looked down from the rooftop. The bartender turned to the drunk guy and said, "You know something? You're a real asshole when you're drunk, Superman." Story 38. Once there were 2 prawns named Carl and Christian. These prawns and their fellow prawn friends were being terrorized by a mean shark that had been harassing the prawn community for weeks. One day, Carl said to Christian, "I'm tired of living in fear. I wish I could be a shark and live without constantly hiding." Just then, a magical cod swam by and said, "Your wish is my command." Instantly, Carl transformed into a shark. Terrified, Christian swam away despite Carl's attempts to reassure him. A few months passed, and Carl found that being a shark was a lonely life. None of his prawn friends would come near him, and he had no place to call home. One day, feeling miserable, he saw the same magical cod swimming by and called out, "Please, turn me back into a prawn. I hate being a shark." The cod granted his wish, and Carl became a prawn again. Excited, Carl swam back to the Coral Kingdom and called out, "Christian, it's me, Carl. I'm back." Christian hesitated and replied, "No way. You'll just eat me." Carl reassured him, saying, "No, I've changed. I found cod. I'm a prawn again, Christian." Story 39. There was a man who lived in a completely golden house. Everything inside was made of gold. One day he heard a knock at his golden door. So he got up from his golden room, walked down the golden hall, descended the golden stairs, went through the golden kitchen, past the golden living room, and finally reached the golden door. At the door stood a hobo asking for a place to stay. The man said, "Okay," and took the hobo back up through the golden living room, through the golden kitchen, up the golden stairs, down the golden hall, and into the golden guest room. Shortly after, there was another knock. The man repeated the same journey down the golden stairs, through the golden hall, and to the golden door. Another hobo stood there, also asking for shelter. The man agreed and took him back up through the golden house to the other golden guest room. Later, a third knock came at the golden door. Again, the man made his way down the golden hall, down the golden stairs, through the golden kitchen, to the golden door. Another hobo asked to stay, and once more the man took him to a guest room. The next morning, the man and the three hobos all made their way from their golden rooms, down the golden hall, down the golden stairs, through the golden kitchen, and gathered in the golden dining room. The man asked the first hobo what he wanted for breakfast, Fruit Loops or Cheerios. The hobo said Fruit Loops. He asked the second hobo, who chose Cheerios. The third hobo also chose Fruit Loops. The moral of the story, 2 out of 3 people prefer Fruit Loops over Cheerios. Story 40. A guy walks into a bar with his pet octopus and announces, "I bet $50 that no one here has a musical instrument that this octopus can't play." Curious, a patron fetches an old guitar from the corner. The octopus inspects it, tunes the strings, and then flawlessly plays a tune. The octopus's owner pockets the $50. Another guy steps up with a trumpet. The octopus grabs the horn, loosens the keys, licks its lips, and starts playing a smooth jazz solo. The second guy, impressed, hands over another $50. The bar owner, having watched the whole spectacle, heads to the back room and returns with a set of bagpipes. He puts them on the bar and says, "If your octopus can play that, I'll give you $100. The octopus takes a look at the bagpipes, lifts them up, turns them over, and examines them from every angle. The owner, confused, says, "What are you messing around for? Just play the damn thing." The octopus responds, "Play it? If I can figure out how to get its pajamas off, I'm gonna F it." Story 41. A man goes on a safari in Africa with his dog, Rover. Unfortunately, Rover gets separated from the group. Lost and wandering, Rover comes across a carcass and starts sniffing the bones. Just then, out of the corner of his eye, Rover spots a leopard stalking him. Thinking quickly, Rover licks the bones and loudly says, That was one delicious leopard. I wonder where I can find another one." The leopard freezes, his plan foiled, and quickly slinks away, terrified. However, a monkey who has been watching the whole scene decides to cause some trouble. He runs after the leopard and tells him how the dog tricked him. Furious, the leopard heads back with the monkey riding on his back, eager to see how things unfold. Rover, noticing their approach but keeping his cool, pretends not to see them. Loudly he says, "Where is that monkey? I sent him off an hour ago to fetch me another leopard, and he's still not back."